Have you ever pondered what may occur if you could see into the future simply by sipping your glass? Imagine yourself at a sophisticated New Year's Eve celebration with friends and family. The act of toasting, which seems innocent at first but conceals something far deeper that none of the guests could have predicted, exposes your fate. What if I told you that there's more than just bubbles in the champagne glasses you raise? What if you examine them and all you find is a reflection of your own death in the upcoming year? A future from which you will be unable to escape no matter how hard you try? Do you still think you could drink? It was a normal New Year's Eve celebration, the kind that everyone looks forward to. The room was filled with a warm glow from the city lights outside the window, as well as the sound of music and laughter. The party had begun with excitement, couples dancing, old friends remembering past years, and of course the extravagant buffet table, laden with delicacies and a tall stack of champagne glasses waiting to be filled. However, as the clock struck midnight, something strange happened. Every time someone raised their glass to toast, the vision would flash in the reflection. At first it was hardly noticeable, just a flicker or glint that could have been mistaken for a trick of the light. But in an instant, those who looked into their glasses saw something much clearer, something far darker. They saw their own fate. What started out as a straightforward toast became into a window into the future, with each reflection revealing the precise manner in which they would pass away in the upcoming year. No one was able to avoid it or alter their fate. The first person to notice it was Julia, a young woman who had recently gotten engaged to her boyfriend friend. As she raised her glass to join in the celebration, she saw a flash of snow and a mountain in her champagne, and then, as if it were a slow-motion movie, she saw herself falling down an avalanche, helpless and heartbroken. For a moment, she thought it was a trick, a hallucination, but as she looked around, she realized that everyone else seemed to be unaware of what she had seen. Her breath caught as she tried to make sense of it, but she was unable to. Was it a warning, a premonition, or was it just a random image conjured by the bubbles in the drink at the other end of the table? Tom, a successful businessman in his 40s who had established a software empire, raised his glass. His image appeared to shimmer, then solidify into a somber picture. He saw himself laying on the ground, his eyes glassy, his breath gone, his corpse in a pool of blood. He got up and froze, not understanding what he was witnessing. He glanced around rapidly, hoping to find some indication that someone else had also seen it, but nobody else appeared to be bothered, and the celebration went on as if nothing had happened. Was it his imagination? Was this some weird mental trick? He felt lightheaded, his hands trembling as he squeezed the glass harder, as if he could stop the VIS from happening by willpower alone. But it was useless. There was no getting out of it. Kate, who had just learned with delight that she was carrying her first child, gazed into her champagne with an odd apprehension. She didn't see anything at first, but then she saw a figure, someone she didn't recognize, a man standing far away, observing her with a disquieting look. A beat skipped across her heart. The feeling of dread persisted even after she swiftly turned her head away and peered back. But the figure had vanished. As the image in the reflection dimmed, a menacing warning that appeared to reverberate in her head replaced it. There is a cost to the future. What was meant by it? Was this a passing idea or a portent of something to come? Kate's chest began to feel uneasy, and she was unable to get rid of it. She attempted to dismiss it, but it was ineffective since the image of the unidentified man and the terrifying warning he appeared to give occupied her thoughts. The space started to transform the once A's. Everyone began to wonder if something strange was happening. The lively conversation and music faded into a low murmur. Some tried to laugh it off, blaming the visions on the excitement of the moment or possibly too much alcohol, but others weren't so sure. Their eyes darted anxiously toward their glasses, concerned that they too might catch a glimpse of something they couldn't see. The weight of what had happened earlier made everyone pause each time they lifted their glass to take another sip. Was it a perverse game or something more sinister? As the night wore on and the once jolly atmosphere became tight and oppressive, the images kept playing out and the reflections became more vivid with each toast. People started to notice something else because the visions in the glasses were no longer just random flashes. They were exact, unquestionable, and impossible to ignore. It looked as though the future had already been set in action, and that the only thing left to do was watch it unfold. The champagne no longer seemed like a joyous drink. Instead, it felt like a curse, a bad omen from which they were unable to escape. Those who had witnessed their deaths were unable to escape the vision. Clara, a lady who had led a life of silent struggle, felt her heart racing. She had never been a believer in mysticism or superstitions, but as she gazed into her glass, she saw something that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't death, but something far worse. It wasn't a vision of death, rather, it was a vision of complete and utter loss, with everything she had worked for and everything she had built slipping away from her as if it were nothing at all. She tried to look away to avoid the image, but the more she struggled, the more vivid it became. And then, as if in response to her distress, the lights in the room flickered and the music suddenly stopped. Silence fell over the room like a thick blanket in the eerie quiet that followed. The reflections in the glasses grew darker and more distorted. People started to panic, some shouting, others crying, and some, like Tom and Julia, simply stared at their glasses, transfixed by the images they saw. The once celebratory occasion had turned into something else entirely, a nightmare from which they couldn't wake up. The reflections in the glasses no longer just showed their deaths. They seemed to reveal something deeper, something ancient and malevolent. A force that had been quietly observing and now had them in its grip. The champagne no longer felt like a symbol of joy, but a trapped one that each person had walked into unknowingly. As the night wore on, no one was spared. Those who had seen their future could do nothing to change it. It was as if the vision was a chain binding them to an unalterable fate. The party, once filled with laughter and light, had become a scene of chaos and terror. The glasses, empty, now lay abandoned on the table. But their reflections continued to haunt the guests, and with every passing minute, the sense of doom grew stronger, as if the very air in the room was thick with the weight of all that had been revealed at the stroke of midnight. The final toast came. No one knew if it was the last, but it felt like it. The reflections in the glass had become the final markers of fate, and no one could look into their glass without seeing what awaited them. As the guests fled, the last thing they saw was their own reflection in the empty glasses, now only shadows of who they had been. As the celebration came to an abrupt end in a panic and fear. You may be wondering what would happen if you took a sip from your glass at this very moment. If you've read this far, would you be able to avoid it and avoid the doom that awaits you? Or would you see the same vision and the same terrible end as the others? The next story, if your worst desires were fulfilled in the most perverse manner imaginable, how would you respond? Consider writing something as straightforward as, "I want to be happier this year." But something in the cosmos takes it literally, and the outcome is so horrifying that you wish you had never made the wish in the first place. The same thing happened to a group of friends who, one chilly December night, came into an old book in which their New Year's resolutions not only materialized, but did so in a terrifying manner. It's not your normal group of pals gathering for a party, which is how it all started. Just 6 of them, the closest group in college, were prepared to celebrate New Year's Eve together, once more like they always did. The custom was straightforward. On the final night of the year, everyone would write their resolutions on a piece of paper, burn it, and then wait the following day to see how their desires would be fulfilled. However, that particular night would be unique. It all began when Emily, one of the group's girls, saw an ancient book in an antique store that was dusty, had a worn-out cover, and symbols she couldn't quite identify. She bought it without giving it much thought. At midnight, her friends started writing their resolutions on the yellowed pages of the enigmatic volume. They did this every year, but something about the atmosphere that night felt different, almost tense. The book had a mystical quality, almost as if it were calling to her. It appeared as though the act of writing down those resolutions had more weight than the wishes themselves, making every word seem heavier. I want to be happier, succeed in my career, and be surrounded by people who value me. Emily was the first to write this year. No one thought much of it, and the rest of the night was filled with laughter and jokes. However, the next morning when they woke up, they began to notice strange things and was the first to experience something terrifying at her job. A great opportunity appeared before her. a promotion she had been waiting for her entire life. But not everything was as it seemed. The offer came with a trap, a condition she couldn't refuse. They asked her to sign a contract without reading it, promising her everything she had dreamed of. But as soon as she signed it, something inside her changed. Emily began to feel like a mere pawn in a game she didn't fully understand, and soon the people around her began to seem distant, manipulative. Almost as if they went human, the happiness she had wished for became a gilded cage. And soon she realized her coworkers were not just indifferent to her, but somehow were manipulating her thoughts and actions. It was as if someone were playing with her mind, leading her down a path with no exit. Then it was Michael's turn, who wrote a simple wish. Perhaps the most innocent of them all this year: I want to find true love, someone to share my life with. At first, everything seemed fine. He met a girl named Sophie who seemed like the perfect woman. Everything progressed quickly, as if destiny itself were pushing them together. However, Michael soon began to notice something strange about Sophie. She seemed to know his every thought before he even spoke them aloud, and their conversations grew more intense than any relationship he had been in. Somehow, Sophie was controlling him without him realizing it. The closer he got to her, the more he felt like he was losing control of his own thoughts. When Michael realized that Sophie could not only hear his thoughts, but also control them, he began to have doubts that something was amiss, and the darkness took over his thoughts. The ideal relationship he had dreamed of turned into a debilitating and compulsive nightmare. The relationship became volatile and possessive, and one night Michael woke up to discover Sophie had vanished, leaving only a note. It was written in blood that you will always have me, whether you like it or not. When Sarah's time came, things became worse because she was the most cynical person in the group and didn't believe in superstitions. Sarah wrote something straightforward and innocuous. I want to learn how to trust people this year. It was almost a foolish hope, but she could never have predicted what transpired. Sarah started to trust people more than she usually did, and she let someone fool her. She met a man online who immediately won her trust and asked her to do something horrible. Give him personal information in return for cash. She thought that everything was all right because this individual seemed so polite, but the truth quickly became apparent. The bond between this man and her was nothing more than a complex plot to control her and take her identity. Every time Sarah attempted to break free from the link, something darker took over, reminding her that she had stepped into a terrible trap. This man's figure haunted and threatened her, as though she was totally exposed to the worst because she wanted to trust people. What a shame it didn't take long for the others to realize that something was wrong. Every resolution in that book appeared to accomplish a goal, but in such a perverse manner that all they wanted was to get rid of everything associated with that wretched book. The trouble was that the more they attempted to do so, the more it clung to them, not just in their thoughts, but also in their wishes. Odd effects started to appear even for individuals who hadn't written in the book. Ben, who had only watched from a distance, felt as though forces beyond his understanding were controlling his own life. As though something unseen were influencing his reality, he noticed how his surroundings started to shift, and how those around him become icier and more aloof. Everything that had once meant something to him, including friendship, trust, and love, started to fall apart. But the most horrifying part was realizing that their wishes were actually being fulfilled in a perverse way, and that someone or something was still writing in the book even after they closed it. Every day, the blank pages would be filled with new resolutions, as if the book were foretelling their deepest desires and fears from which they were unable to escape. Therefore, before writing in a book that promises to grant your desires, consider again. What could appear to be a straightforward exercise to start the year off well could turn into a never-ending nightmare that will follow you until the day you die. What would happen if your greatest desires were realized in a perverted and hazardous manner? You may never find out, but just in case, make sure you're ready for your wish to come true. Please remember to like and comment on this story if you liked it. If you would like to hear more spooky stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. When the darkness calls to us again, I'll see you.